Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The UFC didn't launch with flashy knockouts or wild haymakers. It started with a skinny dude in a gi choking out monsters like it was a magic trick. Royce Gracie walked into UFC 1 at 170 pounds and made trained fighters look like they were stuck in slow motion. No gloves, no weight classes, no rounds, just tap or nap. What made BJJ terrifying was how invisible it looked. Guys would take Gracie down thinking they had the upper hand. Next thing you know, they're getting triangled, armbarred, or choked with their own clothes. Ken Shamrock, Dan Severn, Art Jemerson. Didn't matter. Royce ran through them all. The Gracie family had been waiting decades to prove that technique beats power, and this was their stage. It forced every fighter to adapt. By UFC 5, if you didn't know how to defend a rear-naked choke, you were a paycheck. Camps around the world scrambled to add BJJ to their toolkits. It wasn't an option. It was survival. But once the secret was out, the counterpunch came fast. Wrestlers learned how to neutralize the guard. Strikers developed takedown defense, and pure BJJ guys, they started getting flattened if they couldn't close the distance. Still, fighters like Damian Maia, Charles Oliveira, Fabricio Verdum showed the art's staying power. They evolved with it. Oliveira turned BJJ into a highlight reel, walking people down, pulling guillotines mid-scramble, racking up the most submission wins in UFC history. Today, BJJ isn't the star of the show, but it's part of every performance. Even strikers drill triangle escapes. Even wrestlers learn rubber guard. The mystery might be gone, but the legacy's permanent. Wrestling. Interestingly, once the BJJ wave calmed down, wrestlers started stacking wins like rent was due. Fighters like Mark Coleman, Randy Couture, and Matt Hughes turned every octagon into a grindhouse. If they got on top of you, that was your weekend plans canceled. What made wrestling so dangerous was the control. You didn't need a knockout punch when you could dictate where the fight happened. Want to stand and bang? Too bad, you're going for a ride. Want to throw up a triangle? Good luck doing it with someone elbowing your ribs from half guard. The rules helped too. The cage favored pressure fighters who could wall, pin, and drag opponents down. Add in scoring systems that reward control time, and suddenly Division I All-Americans were running through divisions. By the late 2000s, the UFC title picture was flooded with wrestlers. GSP, John Jones, Frankie Edgar, Daniel Cormier, Kamaru Usman, all with deep wrestling backgrounds, all with belts. GSP turned double legs into art. Jones used Greco-Roman clinch work like it was telepathy. Usman walked down strikers without blinking. But what separated great wrestlers from legends was adaptation. The ones who added slick boxing or submission defense took over. The ones who stuck to lay and pray got booed out of title contention. And now, wrestling isn't just a base, it's the foundation. Every top camp drills sprawls and single-leg counters like their reputation depends on it, because in UFC it kinda does. Muay Thai. This art didn't arrive in MMA with subtlety. It showed up throwing elbows, chewing up legs, and turning clinches into crime scenes. Fighters like Anderson Silva, Jose Aldo, and Joanna turned the ancient Thai striking art into a weapon of mass destruction. They didn't ask for permission. At its core, Muay Thai is about efficiency through violence. Elbows slice, knees crush, low kicks chop rhythm out of opponents like they're knocking down trees. In the early days of MMA, it was overshadowed by grapplers. But once striking defense caught up, Muay Thai specialists started carving through divisions. Anderson Silva's clinch against Rich Franklin looked like a physics experiment in how many knees a human body can take. Jose Aldo's leg kicks shut down explosive wrestlers before they even had a chance to shoot. Bonna's volume and precision turned title fights into medical reports. Muay Thai also gave fighters the ability to fight from anywhere. Outside range with kicks, inside the pocket with elbows, and up close in the clinch. But it wasn't all dominance. Without solid takedown defense, pure Muay Thai fighters left vulnerable. Once wrestlers adapted, the style had to evolve. That's when Muay Thai integrated. Fighters began mixing it with footwork, distance management, and sprawl training. Suddenly you had strikers like Rafael Fiziev and Edson Barboza who could defend the takedown and still light up opponents with combinations from hell. Today, almost every elite striker borrows from Muay Thai. Look at the top UFC lightweight. The knees, the clinch control, the low calf kicks, it's all there. Not every fighter trains it pure, but every striker in the UFC respects it. Boxing. But before we get into that, if you're into breaking down martial arts like this, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, because this is just the beginning. Now, moving on. Everyone knew boxing could work. Crisp hands, tight defense, knockout power. But the question was, how well could it survive in a world full of leg kicks and takedowns? Turns out, with the right fighter, it could shine under the bright lights. Early on, most boxers got wrecked. The stance was too upright. The footwork didn't translate. Grapplers dragged them down and into the night quick. But when boxing merged with takedown defense, it became a problem. Nick and Nate Diaz, with their pressure and endless jabs, overwhelmed people. Conor McGregor made timing and counterpunching a highlight reel. Francis Ngannou turned heavyweight bouts into one-punch test simulations. Boxing in the UFC is less about swinging and more about control, reading range, setting traps, and snapping off counters before opponents can react. Fighters who mastered it made their opponents look like they were stuck in delay mode. Junior Dos Santos, Max Holloway, Petr Yan all used boxing not just to score, but to break rhythm, pace, and confidence. The glove size changes everything. In a boxing ring, defense can be high guard and shoulder rolls. In MMA, those 4-ounce gloves leave no room for error. Slipping in footwork became the lifeline. Head movement got sharper. Distance control had to be perfect. But boxing alone still isn't enough. Fighters with pure hands get chewed up by leg kicks or taken down. That's why the elite ones like Dustin Poirier or Sean O'Malley balance footwork, angles, and anti-wrestling skills. They blend boxing into the MMA puzzle instead of trying to force it in. Sambo. When Khabib Nurmagomedov hit the UFC, people weren't just looking at the fighter. They were trying to figure out what Sambo actually was. Built in Soviet military gyms and forged through decades of combat tournaments, Sambo's part judo, part wrestling, part strike and drag. And in MMA, it's been a nightmare to deal with. This wasn't theory, it was execution. Khabib used Sambo's chain takedowns, leg entanglements, and top pressure like he had cheat codes. Fighters who'd stuffed double legs before couldn't get off the cage. Guys who trained with world-class strikers looked helpless once the grip landed. 29 fights, 0 losses, 0 answers. But Khabib didn't start the fire. Fedor Emelianenko, the original Sambo icon, dominated Pride FC with the same DNA. Explosive throws, tight ground control, submissions that came out of nowhere. He made a generation of fans believe Russia had its own martial arts factory, and they weren't wrong. What sets Sambo apart is its aggression. Where BJJ slows things down, Sambo speeds things up. Fighters transition from trip to submission to strike without giving opponents breathing room. It thrives in scrambles, in chaos, and especially in the clinch. Sambo's also brought something else to MMA, the Dagestani training system. It's not just the techniques, it's the grind. Wrestle bear as a kid type of culture. Fighters like Islam Makhachev, Zabit Magomed Sharapov, and Magomed Anklev all carry the same pressure-heavy, smother-first approach. Karate. For years, karate was the punchline. Too rigid, too flashy, too dojo-only for the real fight game. Then Lyoto Machida stepped in like a ghost with a black belt. Southpaw stance, lightning-fast blitzes, and a calm expression that barely changed, even while knocking people out. What made Machida different was the timing. Most fighters threw combos. He threw traps. He didn't chase you. He waited, watched, and then struck like he'd seen the replay before it happened. In 2009, he captured UFC gold and made traditional Shotokan look like a legitimate MMA weapon. That wasn't supposed to happen. Then came Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Wide stance, hands low, bouncing on his toes. He wasn't just awkward, he was surgical. Head kicks out of nowhere, side kicks to the gut, circling movement that made even elite strikers look confused. And when people thought they had him cornered, he'd pivot out and snipe again. Karate's strength is in its awkwardness. The footwork, the range, the blitz timing, it's hard to simulate in sparring. Fighters can't replicate it without fully switching styles. That unpredictability gave karate specialists an edge, especially early in fights. But once opponents closed the distance or figured out the rhythm, karate fighters had to adapt. That's why the successful ones blended in wrestling scrambles or clinch escapes to keep the chaos at bay. Even now, the style survives in pieces, in calf-kicking counter-strikers, and bladed stances that confuse timing, and guys like Michael Peria who use spin kicks mid-combo. Pure karate may not rule divisions anymore, but its blueprint lives inside fighters who mix grace and violence. Taekwondo. Most people thought Taekwondo was just for tournaments and kids in chest protectors. Then the UFC cage lit up with spinning kicks and highlight reel knockouts that made fans do double takes. Edson Barboza's wheel kick, Yair Rodriguez's upward elbow, and Anthony Pettis' Showtime kick off the cage. The DNA was pure Taekwondo. Speed, timing, and insane flexibility. The core of Taekwondo is built around kicking. Fast, flashy, and delivers from angles most fighters aren't trained to handle. It's not just power, it's deception. The hips turn one way and the legs come from another direction entirely. Fighters like Barboza made their careers off it. Ask Terry Eatum. But Taekwondo didn't dominate, it disrupted. That's what made it dangerous. You couldn't plan for a fight that looked like a video game. Yair Rodriguez proved that when he threw up an upward elbow knockout with 1 second left on the clock. Nobody trains for that. The downside, Taekwondo's traditional stance can leave fighters vulnerable. Hands are low. Balance favors kicking out over defending takedowns. And when you're spinning, you're exposed. That's why the successful strikers had to evolve. Barboza added Muay Thai. Yair worked with wrestling coaches. Fighters didn't abandon the kicks, they protected them. Modern MMA striking has barred plenty from TKD. Look at the calf kicks. Look at setups, offside kicks. Look at how range is controlled with bouncing footwork. The influence is there, even if the pure form isn't. Kickboxing. When Israel Adesanya stepped into the UFC, he brought a highlight reel that looked like it came from another dimension. Head movement, feints, lightning counters, all sharpened in kickboxing rings long before he ever touched an octagon. Over 80 professional bouts, dozens of knockouts, and a rhythm no one could mirror. That wasn't hype, that was experience. Kickboxing gave MMA fighters the tools to win the striking game with efficiency. Not just throwing wild shots, timing, combinations, angles, and footwork. Alex Pereira, another Glory veteran, followed a similar path. Brutal left hooks, devastating leg kicks, and walk-off knockouts that didn't need a second opinion. Unlike Muay Thai, kickboxing is about tempo. Fighters work off combos, use constant movement, and punish mistakes with clean counters. Leg kicks set the tone. Head kicks end the show, and when you mix that with elite takedown defense, you get monsters who control range and break opponents before the ground even matters. But transitioning from ring to cage isn't automatic. No ropes, no corner resets. Fighters had to adapt to wrestling pressure and clinch control. That's where many failed. But those who blended kickboxing with the MMA grind turned into champions. Look at Peter Yan, Mirko Krokrap, and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. All turned crisp striking into domination. Even today, kickboxing is the gold standard for striking heavy fighters. It's clean, sharp, and punishes hesitation. With the right training camp, it becomes nearly untouchable. Most of the UFC's most dangerous stand-up specialists, they come from kickboxing roots. It doesn't need flash, it delivers results. Judo. When Ronda Rousey exploded onto the UFC scene, judo finally got its spotlight. She didn't walk opponents down, she flipped them through the air. Every entrance ended with a hip toss, a scramble, and someone tapping. In just under 3 years, she stacked up 6 straight UFC title wins, all by finish, most in the first round. Judo wasn't just back, it was breaking records. The core of judo is about balance and leverage. Fighters don't shoot for legs, they clinch, control, and execute throws or trips using momentum. That makes it deadly in tight spaces, especially against aggressive strikers. Karo Parisian was throwing people on their heads in the early 2000s. Yoshihiro Akiyama brought Olympic-level technique into wild scrambles. It was Rousey who took it to the mainstream. Her go-to was the Uchimata, a brutal inner thigh throw followed by an armbar that almost felt automatic. The speed of her finishes made judo look like a cheat code. But when she ran into someone who stuffed the clinch and punished her stand-up, everything crumbled. Holly Holm ended the streak with a head kick, and just like that, the judo wave hit the wall. Part of judo's struggle in MMA comes from its roots. The gi plays a massive role in control, but in the UFC, there's nothing to grip. That means judokas have to modify every entry, every setup, and against wrestlers with strong bases, the throws are harder to land. Still, the fundamentals survive: clinch control, body locks, inside trips. They're all over the cage now, whether or not they're labeled judo. Fighters like Kayla Harrison, 2-time Olympic gold medalist, are keeping the fire alive in other promotions, and it's only a matter of time before their skill set hits the UFC again. Jeet Kune Do. No belts, no kata, no tournament medals. Jeet Kune Do wasn't about tradition, it was a mindset. Created by Bruce Lee, it was designed for the ring. It was built for whatever worked. The philosophy was simple: absorb what's useful, discard what's not. That single sentence quietly shaped the future of MMA. While Jeet Kune Do wasn't designed as a one-size-fits-all system, its core principle made it revolutionary. Bruce Lee rejected rigid styles. He trained boxing, fencing, Wing Chun, wrestling, whatever gave him an edge. Long before UFC 1 ever happened, he was already talking about the need to combine striking and grappling in a real fight. That blueprint ended up becoming the backbone of modern MMA. Fighters didn't wear the Jeet Kune Do label, but they followed its rules. Georges St-Pierre, one of the greatest to ever do it, trained under Dan Inosanto, Bruce Lee's protege, and credited Jeet Kune Do's mentality for his versatility. Striking, wrestling, footwork, everything adapted mid-fight. Anderson Silva, another all-time great, also paid homage. His head movement, range control, and counter setups all fit within the Jeet Kune Do toolbox. Silva once said Bruce Lee was his biggest inspiration, not for his moves, but for his freedom. Jeet Kune Do didn't have a major gym, no Olympic team, no tournament circuit, but its DNA is in every hybrid fighter who refuses to be boxed into one style. It's not about stance, it's about solutions. Kung Fu. For decades, Kung Fu was untouchable, not in competition, in myth. Movies made it look like the ultimate fighting style. Bruce Lee's one-inch punch, Jet Li's explosive forms, Jackie Chan's acrobatics, it was everywhere. On screen, it looked unbeatable, but when the UFC cage opened, reality stepped in. Kung Fu's roots are deep. With over 400 substyles, it covers everything from Wing Chun to Praying Mantis, Shaolin, and Sanda. It's a philosophy, a discipline, a cultural pillar, but under MMA rules, it struggled. Fighters trained in pure kung fu got overwhelmed by wrestlers and outpaced by kickboxers. The stances were too upright, the techniques too stylized. What worked in drills didn't hold up under pressure. Still, elements of kung fu quietly found their way in. Tony Ferguson, known for his chaos and creativity, trained Wing Chun during his rise. His use of elbows, inside control, and awkward rhythm gave opponents real problems. Anderson Silva, a Muay Thai striker at his core, also paid tribute to kung fu in his head movement and fluid counters. The one sub-style that made the biggest dent? Sanda, also known as Chinese kickboxing. Fighters like Kung Lee use it to knock opponents out with spinning back kicks and unorthodox footwork. It blended traditional flair with wrestling-style throws, making it more adaptable than other kung fu styles. Kung fu didn't deliver UFC champions, but it challenged the sport in a different way. It forced MMA to ask what's effective and what's just performance. And every now and then, when a fighter throws a crescent kick or a rolling sweep that nobody saw coming, that's kung fu leaving its signature. Capoeira was born in the streets, disguised as dance, and passed down by enslaved Brazilians who weren't allowed to train combat. What looked like a performance was actually survival, and somehow centuries later it ended up inside the UFC. Most fighters saw capoeira as pure style, high-risk flips, spinning kicks, wild movement. Then Marcus Lilo Aurelio went viral with a flying capoeira knockout that looked like it was pulled straight from a video game. The crowd went silent, the opponent went flat, but the real breakout came with Michel Pereira. No one had ever seen a UFC fighter move like this. Hands down, dancing mid-fight, flipping off the cage, launching tornado kicks mid-combo. The guy was chaos on legs, and behind the flash, he could still crack jaws. The unpredictability had real value. Capoeira's strength is rhythm and deception. Fighters trained in it use constant movement to throw off timing. The kicks are disguised, the setups are odd, and just when you think you figured out the rhythm, the direction changes. That said, it's tough to rely on alone. Capoeira burns energy fast. One misstep during a flip and you're eating ground and pound. That's why the fighters who used it best, like Pereira, eventually reined it in. They kept the unpredictability but added structure, defense, and patience. In pure MMA terms, Capoeira hasn't built champions, but it's delivered some of the wildest moments in highlight history. And that's it. So now that every style's been tested inside the cage, what's next? Will the future of MMA belong to one style again, or are we about to see something brand new take over the fight game? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.